Edition of Arirang News. I'm Mark Broom. Let's kick things off with a look at the day's headlines. A North Korean delegation is in South Korea to prepare for a highly anticipated Olympics concert. Led by the country's best-known pop star, the visit comes as the IOC gave North Korea the green light to compete at the Games. Today, the delegation will look at possible venues here in Seoul. Afghan authorities confirm at least 18 people, including 14 foreigners, were killed during an hours-long siege by the Taliban at a popular Kabul hotel. Plus, just 21 years old and smashing records, Korean tennis star Chung Hyeon beats the world number 4 Alexander Zverev in the round of 32 at the Australian Open. Chung sets up a clash with a legend of the sport in the last 16. So let's start with day 2 of the North Korean inspection team stay here in the south, led by a North Korean pop star. The 7-member delegation is due in Seoul today to study possible performance venues after spending the night in Gangneung, close to the host city of the Winter Games. It's the first such exchange between the Koreas in years, following months of tension over the regime's nuclear and missile programs. Our Ji Myung-gil starts us off.
A slight smile on her face, but no words from Hyun Song-wol. She's the North Korean singer leading a team who are inspecting possible performance venues in Seoul and in Gangneung, one of the host cities of the Olympics. Hyun is head of the Samjeon Orchestra, which will be coming to South Korea to perform. And she's the leader of the all-female Moranbong band, said to be a favorite of the North leader Kim Jong-un. On the second day of their trip Monday, Hyun and her team will visit 3 or 4 facilities in Seoul, including a Sky Dome stadium east of the capital with a seating capacity of over 20,000. Hyun and the inspectors will then head back to North Korea later in the day. On Sunday, Hyun visited 2 venues, one a local gymnasium and the Gangneung Art Center, which has a capacity of around 1,500 people. During working-level talks last week, the North said it would send a 140-member art troupe during next month's PyeongChang Winter Olympic Games to give one performance each in Seoul and Gangneung to celebrate the big event. On Tuesday, South Korea will send an inspection team to the North to prepare for joint sports training and joint cultural events to be held prior to the Olympics at the North Masikryong Ski Resort at Mount Kumgang. Seoul plans to send a 12-member team to the north using the eastern land route for 3 days of inspections. And on Thursday, North Korea will send an 8-member delegation to South Korea to look around the Olympic facilities, such as stadiums, lodgings, and the press center for 3 days. The North team will again enter South Korea using the Gyeonggi Line train on the western side of the peninsula. Ji Myung-gil, Arirang News.
Now, with the PyeongChang Winter Olympics just over a couple of weeks away, we now know the exact number of North Korean athletes that will be competing at the Games. Details on that and other issues related to the North's participation were ironed out over the weekend at the IOC's HQ in Switzerland. Lee Seung-jae reports.
46, 22, and 5. Those were the key numbers from the 4-way talks at the IOC headquarters in Lausanne, Switzerland over the weekend. North Korea will send 46 athletes and delegation members to the PyeongChang Winter Olympics, including 22 athletes who are set to compete in 5 sports: women's ice hockey, figure skating, short track speed skating, cross-country skiing, and alpine skiing. Do Jong-hwan, South Korea's Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism, who was at the talks, once again stressed the importance of North Korea's participation at the Winter Games.
The IOC believes the top agenda for the 2018 PyeongChang Winter Olympics is for dialogue, understanding and peace. We have been talking for 2 days to make that happen. It's meaningful that through sports we can open the path to peaceful coexistence and exchanges rather than military confrontation.
Among the 22 athletes set to compete, 12 North Korean women ice hockey players were added to the roster, making the total number of players on the joint Korean team roster at 35. As part of the deal to have a joint team, head coach Sarah Murray must play at least 3 North Korean players in each game. Another agreement was joint training for the ski team, set to take place at Mount Keungang and the Masikryong ski resort in the North's eastern region in a 3-day program beginning Tuesday. The joint session will also include a joint cultural event in the Mount Keungang area. The North Korean athletes will travel to PyeongChang on February 1st via rail. The rest of the delegation, including the performance team and the Taekwondo demonstration team, will arrive on February 7th. With the eyes of the world on the PyeongChang Winter Olympics, the two Koreas will walk side by side at the opening ceremony on February 9th, with the Korean unification flag leading the way. And when the joint women's ice hockey team take to the ice for the first time on February 10th, the Korean folk song Arirang will be played as their anthem. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
And amid the thawing inter-Korean ties, South Korea and the US have reaffirmed their will to stay united and work together to pressure North Korea to abandon its nuclear weapons program. Seoul's defense ministry says Vice Defense Minister Seo Chu-sok and his American counterpart, US Deputy Secretary of Defense Pat Shanahan, reaffirmed the allies' ironclad alliance and the importance of maintaining vigilance and unity in the face of North Korean aggression. Their meeting in Washington came as South Korea has been looking to ease tensions in the region through North Korea's participation at next month's Winter Olympics. The officials also agreed that South Korea and the US will remain unified in working to achieve a complete, verifiable and irreversible denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. South Korea's Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa will leave for the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland this week to talk North Korea nuclear issues as well as the regime's participation at the upcoming PyeongChang Winter Olympics in the south. Attending the forum with some 70 heads of states and governments, Minister Kang will take part in sessions on North Korea's nuclear crisis as well as an event promoting the PyeongChang Winter Games. Under the theme of creating a shared future in a fractured world, the Foreign Ministry expects this year's global gathering will work to escalate the level of understanding on the situation on the Korean Peninsula. It also hopes to hail the new Moon Jae-in government's people-centered economy with the world and share the administration's plan on development and security fields. Turning now to an uptick in the country's producer prices, the related index has flicked back into the positive zone, rising 0.1% on month in December. Korea's central bank says the producer price index turned up last month for the first time in 2 months over price rises in the agricultural goods and service sectors. Producer prices for agricultural goods had spiked 6%. Prices in the service sector, they edged up 0.1%, and prices of petrochemical goods products rose more than 1%. The index gives a heads up of future consumer inflation. Now, colonial architecture was built and used by the Japanese army in Korea during the period of Japan's brutal colonial rule of Korea. Some of the remnants remain standing to this day, and the Korean government is investing a substantial amount of money to turn them into historical resources. Jo Sung-min with the story.
Mokpo, a city located in Jeollanam-do province, is widely considered as one of Korea's 3 biggest port cities. The city is also home to various historical relics and old buildings that date back to the early 20th century when Korea was under Japan's colonial rule. Among these buildings stands out the former Japanese consulate. The 2-story structure made of red bricks has been turned into a museum. From the wallpapers to the details on the ceiling, most of the building has been restored to how it looked like in the early 1900s.
I didn't know that artifacts from the period still existed. Seeing them with my own eyes was more meaningful than reading about them in textbooks.
According to officials, nearly 300 colonial buildings are still standing around the city, and most of them have either undergone renovations or maintained intact through decades.
We're planning to restore other colonial buildings and turn them into museums and exhibition areas. We're also working on the development of cultural tour programs.
The government is set to back Mokpo's plan by injecting nearly $6 million to the restoration program, paving the way for transforming Mokpo to a hub of culture and historical significance. Jo Sung-min, Arirang News.
Now in sports news, Korea's 21-year-old tennis sensation Chung Hyeon made history over the weekend as the world number 58 dumped Alexander Zverev of Germany out in the round of 32 at the Australian Open. Chung becomes the first Korean tennis player to defeat an opponent ranked in the top 5 and ties the record for the best finish in a major tournament by a Korean tennis player with Lee Hyung-taek, who made the round of 16 at the 2000 and 2007 US Open. Meanwhile, at 5 p.m. local time, Chung is set to face off against former world number 1 and current 14th ranked Novak Djokovic of Serbia in hopes of setting another tennis record. Now for a look at stories making headlines around the world, and we start with a Taliban attack in the Afghan capital Kabul. At least 18 people have been killed, with fears the death toll could rise even further. For more on this and other news from around the world, let's turn to our Noah Aram. So Aram, yet another terror attack in Kabul. Just run us through what happened.
Well, Mark, the attack happened at the Intercontinental Hotel on Saturday and developed into a 13-hour overnight siege. The last of 5 attackers was eventually killed on Sunday, but the Taliban claimed assault had left at least 14 foreigners staying at the hotel dead, along with 4 Afghans. Officials fear the number of casualties could rise and at least 10 people are said to have been wounded. The militants reportedly entered the 6th-floor hotel through a kitchen on Saturday night local time, opening fire on guests and staff and taking dozens of people hostage. During the siege, terrified guests trapped at the top of the building tied bed sheets together and climbed over balconies to escape. Witnesses said the militants were targeting foreigners staying at the hotel. A private firm had recently taken over security at the hotel, which the Afghan Interior Minister said was a mistake. Officials are now trying to work out how the terrorists managed to enter the compound. The Taliban had previously attacked the hotel 6 years ago, but Saturday's assault was the latest in a string of deadly gun and bombing attacks in the capital that have targeted government facilities, hotels, mosques and other locations. The United States is into the second day of a government shutdown with little sign of progress as Republicans and Democrats continue to try and stick the blame on the other side. As the bickering goes on, experts say a prolonged shutdown could have a detrimental impact on the U.S. economy. Our Park So-yeon reports.
The U.S. Senate is trying to find ways to reach a consensus to bring an end to the government shutdown before economic repercussions start to bite. A bill to fund the federal government did not receive the required 60 votes, as Republicans did not have sufficient votes to pass the bill without the Democrats' support. Senate Democrats have refused to agree on government funding unless President Trump agrees to deal with legislation to protect about 700,000 immigrants who are illegally brought to the country as children. The Republican leader of the Senate expressed his dissatisfaction over the shutdown.
And all of this was totally unnecessary. There is a broad consensus on both sides of the aisle that DACA and other issues related to illegal immigration require a compromise solution. Almost everybody here, Democrat and Republican, believe we need to get to a solution on the DACA issue and related immigration matters. Bipartisan, bicameral negotiations have been underway for months.
So far, there has been minimal economic impact to the government shutdown, as the early days included the weekend. However, if the impasse drags on, the shutdown could hurt the U.S. economy. White House Budget Director Mick Mulvaney told Fox News on Sunday that the government shutdown could persist for weeks. The longer the shutdown goes on, the stronger the economic impact, increasing the possibility that the U.S. economy's recent growth spurt could stall. The government would delay issuing federal checks, slowing the work process, as well as harming consumer and business optimism. The last government shutdown in 2013 lasted 16 days and cost $20 billion in output and cut 0.5% off annual economic growth. The Congressional Research Service also estimates that government shutdowns cost the U.S. economy at least 0.1 percentage point of growth per week. Economists say the shutdown would not only affect Washington, but will also have ripple effects across the U.S. Park So-yeon, Arirang News.
In other news, China is fuming after a US Navy destroyer sailed near a contested reef in the South China Sea last week. The incident was said to have taken place last Wednesday, some 20 kilometers off Huanguan Island, better known as the Scarborough Shoal, which is subject to a rival claim by the Philippines. Beijing's foreign ministry says the US Navy had violated China's sovereignty and security interests, adding it will take necessary measures to protect them. US officials said the patrol was in line with international law and was an innocent passage. Washington has criticized Beijing for constructing islands and military installations in the South China Sea, saying they could be used to restrict free movement in a critical global trade route. China has expressed anger over America's repeated freedom of navigation operations, which the US military says are separate from political considerations. After a year of testing with its own employees, Amazon will open its first checkout-free grocery store to the public on Monday. The shop in Seattle, known as Amazon Go, will rely on cameras and sensors to identify who the customer is, what he or she buys, and what items, if any, are put back on the shelves. All customers need an Amazon Go smartphone app, which they scan as they enter and leave the store. Payment will be made using a credit card linked to the user's accounts. The retail giant is yet to decide whether or not to open more Amazon Go stores, as it will likely want to test the new technology on a small scale first.
Ice quality and athletic gear are two of the most important elements regarding athletic performance in winter sports. With the PyeongChang 2018 Winter Olympics just around the corner, efforts are underway to ensure that athletes can shine most brightly at the event. Meet some of the artisan craftsmen and technicians and marvel at their masterpieces. This is an office in Nowon-gu, Seoul. It looks like an ordinary office, but it is one of the only 4 ice skating blade manufacturing companies around the globe. The company owner Yang Kyung-sun was an amateur ice hockey athlete during his younger days, and he came into this business almost by accident.
I made and repaired skating blades for me and my friends, and the response was pretty good. That motivated me to produce blades for both professional athletes and junior athletes in school, and it eventually became my profession.
In skating events, including ice hockey, skating boots and blades greatly affect athletes' performances. That's why they are very sensitive about their gear. Massive Tech offers custom-made blades to fit each athlete's foot shape and performance habits.
We have a variety of pre-made products, but for those with specific requirements, we offer custom-made blades. They can choose the radius of curvature, height, shape, and many other things based on their preferences.
What process do they go through to create their products? Each pair goes through manufacturing processes at 6 different factories before completion. In particular, the last procedure, coating, determines the accuracy and angles of athletes' movements, and thus it is the most important.
This part determines the hardness of the blades. When the blade is hard, it enables athletes to scrape the surface, which allows them to move freely and feel stable on the ice.
The company also produced a new sled for Korea's national ice sledge hockey team competing at the 2018 Winter Paralympics. Using magnesium alloy instead of aluminum, which is traditionally used in sled making, the weight has been reduced by 34%, while the solidity has increased 2.5 times.
Since I'm designing blades for paraplegic athletes, safety comes before anything. Magnesium alloy is the perfect material as it's very good for shock absorption.
These days, Yang is working on a new short-track blade, and he will continue to do his utmost to support all the ice sports athletes around the whole world. Athletic gear was one part, and now let's zoom in on ice rinks. Ice conditions are extremely important in curling as they directly affect a stone's movement on an icy lane. Therefore, ice technicians play a crucial role for athletes to display the very best performances. Park Sung-gun is in charge of the ice conditions at this rink. He too was a curling athlete before becoming an ice technician.
I found about this professional when I was abroad training and competing as an ice curling athlete. I pursued my athletic career until 1999 and then left for Canada in 2000 to become an ice technician.
The curling sheet and lines are marked on each sheet, and then water is sprayed onto it to form a new layer. The key is making the sheet as flat and level as possible. The unique part is the spraying of water droplets onto the ice, which forms pebbles upon freezing. The spraying is not as simple as it sounds. It involves specific conditions that must be considered.
I'm mixing hot and cold water to get the ideal temperature. If the water is too hot or cold, it affects pebble formation and rate of freezing.
Park Sung-gun has been designated as an official ice technician for the 2018 Winter Paralympics. Accepting the responsibility on his shoulders, he's determined to provide the best conditions for the athletes to surpass their limits and create miraculous moments.
I'm going to continue to do my best to create an ideal training environment for the athletes gearing up for the PyeongChang Paralympic Games. Personally, it's a great honor as well.
Winter sports started garnering mainstream attention in Korea only recently. Nonetheless, Korea has a bright future thanks to passionate athletes and technicians armed with genuine sportsmanship.
Good morning. The air quality in the Chungcheongdo and Jeollado regions will see high levels during the day, while the rest could see relatively high levels. But once the snow starts to fall in the late afternoon, the whole nation could have better air to breathe in. Upper regions will see heavier snowfall, and even Seoul could see up to 5 centimeters. And this band of snow will bring some real cold air to the nation starting tomorrow. But for now, here are the readings for the day. Seoul will get up to 4 degrees Celsius, while Daegu and Busan will make it to 7 and 9 degrees respectively. And starting tomorrow, daily lows will be hovering at minus 15 degrees Celsius, and even highs will only make it to nearing minus 10 degrees here in the capital. And this round of cold snap will last until the end of January, so be aware. So today could be the warmest day of the week. With that, let's take a look at the international weather for viewers around the world. While most regions in South Korea will see snow from the afternoon or evening hours, most cities in North Korea will see heavier snowfall in many parts, along with freezing temperatures. And as for the rest of Asia, Japan will see a mix of snow and rain for the start of a work week. Meanwhile, heat wave conditions smashed across much of Australia over the weekend. Sydney and Perth will continue to be sweltering, while those in Melbourne will get some brief relief. Heading to North America, those in Washington, D.C. will enjoy spring-like weather conditions under mostly sunny skies on Monday. And as for South America, Sao Paulo will have frequent unstable weather conditions this week. Taking you to Europe, Moscow will be icy cold with a high of minus 9 degrees Celsius, and Seoul will soon get as cold as Moscow or even colder starting tomorrow. Lastly, to Africa, Tripoli will have a rainy start to the work week. And that's all the weather update for now.
Well, a big thank you, as always, to our Ji Hyun for the weather update, and that's pretty much where we're going to leave the news for now as well. Just a reminder, though, that if you want to catch up on all the latest stories, you can find them by going to our website at arirang.com/news. Our next scheduled bulletin is coming up at noon Korea time in around an hour and a half from now. So until then, goodbye.